Story 1. I had been having stomach problems. I went to a gastroenterologist and he told me that he thought I had stomach cancer and he wanted to scope my stomach first thing the next morning. I was scared to death. My wife came home from work and I had her sit down. I told her what the doctor said. I mentioned I would need her to take me because I would not be able to drive afterward. She said, "But I don't want to miss work." That was the exact moment I knew my marriage was over. I found out later she was cheating with a younger man, a father of 3, and it would have messed up their schedule of working late. Note, it turned out I did not have cancer. Story 2. When he made me almost cry at my birthday brunch in front of my friends and smirked like it was funny after humiliating me. It was the lowest point in my life towards the end of it. Edit. For context, I, a 19-year-old female, was in a relationship with a 19-year-old male for over a year. While I understand that he is autistic, as am I, and struggles to understand socially appropriate boundaries and people's feelings at times, the relationship began to become emotionally abusive and strained. This was also due to the contributing red flag behavior of his father, who began to micromanage and control my life and shame me for not being able to always visit and similar things. I was the one who broke things off, much to my own shame, as it was spontaneous after I suffered a panic attack in the mall during a date. It spiraled out of control after that, with his father berating my parents over text messages, and I cried all the way home in the car, while my parents were confused and deeply upset. Story 3. When you start feeling strong waves of cringe while listening to them talk, it's not always anger or disgust. Sometimes, just basic cringe is the body's way of politely reminding you to recoil. Story 4. I think any clear sign is distance. When your partner is avoidant, not engaged, and wants more space out of the blue, it's usually a sign. If you're in a long-term relationship and your partner has a problem with something or someone, they will usually provide details about what's going on. Even if they are mad at you, they'll usually be upset and start some sort of argument. When things get abnormally quiet, it's likely because they are the problem and there's nothing for you to do or fix. They could also be tired of a repeated issue that is likely not to change. Story 5. The sign my relationship was over was when we stopped communicating and spending time together. It just felt like we were going through the motions without any real connection. Story 6. I don't know if it was codependency or anxious attachment, but I feel like my last relationship was full of signs that maybe the relationship wasn't working, and I just ignored them. At one point, we had a check-in and asked each other what we needed more of. I said I was looking for more emotional availability and support from her. She said she wasn't sure if she was able to provide that. She said she wanted more of an effort for me to keep the relationship nourished. I said I'd give it my best. But without my added effort, she didn't feel motivated to provide that additional emotional availability and support. And without her additional emotional availability and support, I didn't feel motivated to make more of an effort. It felt like constant Cold War tactics between us. Story 7. Whenever I told him I was unhappy and wanted to leave him, he started naming all the things I had asked from him over our entire marriage. He said, "I want to be better for you. I want to go to therapy, get you flowers, celebrate holidays together, spend time with our families together, play fewer video games, watch a movie you want to see, go on dates every other week." And it made me realize that he had always been listening to me ask for all these things. He had just been actively choosing not to do them for me because he didn't care about me. Story 8. Whenever we talked about the future, he would be so vague, and eventually, when he replied maybe to a relationship question for the millionth time, I fully realized this man didn't love me, but for whatever reason, didn't have the ability to end it. So I did. Story 9. When she changed her views on having children. I've always wanted to have a big family, and over the course of the relationship, she really changed her views. It wasn't something we had a big argument over, just a disagreement on what we wanted for our lives. The exact line I told her was, "I will always love you, but if we get married, one of us will always resent the other." When I said that to her, we both realized the relationship was over. It was an amicable breakup for the best. Story 10. Unchanged behavior. You can communicate until you're blue in the face, but the relationship is done when you're putting in all of the effort to make it work and they can't even remember what you're upset about, even if you've told them multiple times. It's basically saying they don't care if you're unhappy as long as they're happy or content in the relationship. Story 11. I haven't moved out of the house yet because I'm working on some things so I can buy my own house. However, when I moved into the spare room, the peace that came with just being able to close the door and not deal with his idea of what a relationship should be was immense. I don't have to compromise who I am, how I feel, my goals and ambitions, how I parent, who my friends are, or have my behavior scrutinized. No more being micromanaged. It's just been so much easier and more peaceful. Plus, now I can snuggle in bed with my dog again. I can also be a better parent to my son since I don't have to focus so much on the relationship. Hopefully, in a couple of months, I'll be in a position to move. Edit to add. Also, no more false and unfounded accusations of me cheating. That was really starting to wear me down. Story 12. Given the power of hindsight, it was when she always had an excuse not to meet my family. Her excuses were valid and I loved her, so of course I believed her, but mom twice, dad twice, cousin's wedding, and dad's wedding. I didn't see it because I loved and trusted her. But in hindsight, it's clear she didn't see a future with me and only wanted what I provided. Story 13. When she goes to the pub straight after work and doesn't come back home until 2 in the morning and finding out that she's been having sex with 3 men in your local pub. Story 14. I knew my first marriage was over when I turned onto my street, saw her car in the driveway because she got home before me, and I sighed and said, "Oh no," as I pulled up to the house. Story 15. My ex and I had been together for 9 years, lived together for about 8. If I ever asked him for help with things around the house, he would be incredibly resistant, especially when it came to walking the dog if I was dealing with a pain or dysfunction flare-up. I always get the flu the week before finals. I'm talking fever, body aches, chills, coughing, and lots of snot. I'm legitimately sick. Well, he got home from work, and I was on the couch. I was in and out of consciousness throughout the day. The poor dog hadn't been out on a walk in 8 hours. She had to use the bathroom. I asked him if he could take her outside. His response to my request was, "Maybe the fresh air would do you some good." We were having a cold front. It was 16 degrees out with high winds. I knew it was over then. Sure enough, we ended it a few months later. It wasn't even that he didn't care enough about me that killed any love I had for him. How could anyone resent their partner so much that they'd let a sweet, innocent little dog who loved him remain so uncomfortable just to teach a lesson? What was the lesson he wanted to teach me? That I couldn't depend on him when I was down? Message received. Story 16. We were 15 at the time, so this might be naive and not a problem anymore, but when they're sad and you get sadder, you become annoyed and nervous. Instead of caring about them, you feel even more upset. Also, when they're always sad and you feel like you can't take it anymore. It's not someone's fault to be depressed, of course, absolutely not. But when they become a negative presence, always making you feel worse about everything, and you feel like you need to stop enjoying your life to try to fix theirs, both sides are not okay. When you or your partner feel bad, you should just listen to each other a bit, support each other a bit, and feel better together, not feel worse together. Story 17. Everything I did or said was met with automatic contempt. All the joy or goodness was just completely removed and replaced with violent anger and criticism to hurt, not to change. That's when you realize that there's no coming back, and it's time to make other plans. Story 18. We were still living together but doing most things completely separately. We were basically roommates who happened to sleep in the same bed. That's when I considered it over, anyway. We lived together like that for around 9 months, mostly because neither of us could afford to break our apartment lease. I was working 2 jobs for much of that, and by the end of most 15-hour workdays, I couldn't even stand the thought of going back to our apartment. Not gonna lie, that situation left me in a bad state for years. 0 out of 10. Would not recommend. Story 19. She would talk to me, and I'd be frustrated, just waiting for her to stop. And she brought up marriage, and it gave me anxiety. Those were the main signs. Story 20. When I started to have serious health anxiety, I was convinced I was dying. My body just started shutting down. I suspected that it was all the stress from the relationship, so I recommended therapy. Her response was, "Why would I go to therapy? This is the best I've ever felt. The anxiety had been going on for months. I had seen the doctor to try and figure out what the problem was. I had entered therapy for myself. I even quit a job I had for nearly a decade because I thought maybe it was stress from the job, or I could get a job making more money and she would be more content. I was a nervous wreck, thinking I was dying, and that was the best she ever felt. Darkest period of my life. Story 21. If there is an absence of communication, conversations become less frequent, superficial, and tense. Avoiding honest, meaningful discussions about feelings, needs, or future goals is a common symptom of emotional detachment. Story 22. I am asking myself this question right now. I love my boyfriend, but I am starting to not care if he is around or not. We have the same group of friends, so either way, I know I will see him out. But if he is working or out and I am not, I love having the house to myself lately and dread him coming home. I think it is just a phase, but I am just so neutral towards him. I do not know what to do. Story 23. When we were cuddling in bed and spent most of the time doom scrolling without interaction, there wasn't much left to say. We still talked a lot, but we always ended up in highly controversial topics, which led to very heated debates. I still enjoyed being with her, doing things, but it just felt like we couldn't excite each other anymore. Like a game that you have played through so many times, you know just about everything. It gets stale. I still think we could have stayed together, but neither of us had the time, energy, and will to start new adventures and grow together. Story 24. I could not trust her anymore. I don't know what it was, but I knew something was off. I went through her messages, didn't find anything, and just knew our relationship was over regardless. I told her what I did the same day. We continued to be together for another year, with no intimacy, joy, or lasting laughter. I tried to make it work, I really did, but she chose to leave me. I don't know what changed her so much. Our relationship used to be effortless, but she started to question what she wants and nothing seemed to lighten her mood. I suspect it's depression or some other issues, as she clearly shows some signs of trauma. I tried to make her go to therapy as it helped me in such stages of life. We still live together. She is going to move by the end of the year, but now any effort on my side is too late. She clearly wants me out of her life and I can't be in the way of the only wish she ever had for herself the past whole year, no matter how much I want to win her back. I am really confused still about what's going on. But the point is, I knew this was going to happen a year ago when I realized I don't trust her anymore. Story 25. Woke up one morning, he was still sleeping. Asked myself if I wanted to wake up with him beside me for the next 20 years. I did not. Broke up with him 2 days later. Story 26. Trying to decide if I'm having the signs now or not. I mostly feel exhausted and compassion fatigue after months of him being in a depressive episode and experiencing yet another traumatic experience. I'm having a hard time eliciting sympathy at the moment because none of my relationship needs have been met. Connection seems very distant, intimacy is a challenge, and I dread seeing him because it's just so unpredictable what his mood will be. We have just started couples therapy and he started with a new therapist, but I feel like I need just a little bit of positive and reserve to give me the energy to keep trying, and I haven't gotten it. It's tough because when I hear a lot of other people say these things, it isn't related to mental health concerns, and I don't think of him in a depressed state as really being him. If he does get back to being himself, I think a lot of things will be better. Story 27. We couldn't communicate, so we stopped listening to each other. I got exhausted and frustrated from being stagnant, but I expressed my grievances to her in the wrong tone, so I never got through. I felt angry, defeated, and hopeless, so I left in a huff. Story 28. Realizing that we were just roommates who slept in the same bed, constantly doing our own things in the same house. No physical touching aside from the occasional hug when one of us got home. Those were all precursors to when she would start crying when we had sex. I moved into the spare bedroom not long after that, and we made the decision we weren't happy together. It hurt like hell and still does, but it was the best decision for both of us. Story 29. He asked the judge for a paternity test on our daughter while we were getting court-mandated therapy counseling. Lots of things happened before this that I kept forgiving, but this was absolutely the straw that broke the camel's back. Story 30. I did everything for my wife because I wanted her to be happy. She never cared about my happiness ever. I kept lying to myself, telling myself that one day she will appreciate everything I do for her. One night, I was driving a 30-minute round trip to another state to buy her some soda water she liked, and I realized that she would never do anything like this for me. Story 31. When she said she was doing therapy for me because I asked, but not for herself, and that she was stopping, it's a very valid reason. Not being ready to do self-work is okay. But I knew the relationship would end within a few months if she didn't work on certain things. We broke up for a bunch of reasons with a lot of love and respect.